Hey, Jefi, I've got a quick question for you. Are you ready for it?
I'm always ready for your questions, Ed.
I know you're born ready. Have you ever had a time where you just didn't click with a client and you couldn't quite tell why?
Yes. It was really frustrating actually because I pride myself on human abilities. I
Yeah.
I love people. And so when I have that disconnect, I start reeling and I notice that when I do that, I start making mistakes and I do weird things and I say weird things. It's almost like, woo, woo, woo.
Yeah, yeah,
What
you're
am I
trying to win them
doing
over. Yeah, you're trying to win them over, and it's
wrong?
like you're working hard to
Yeah.
bridge this
Yes.
gap, and you
Yes.
and you don't know why. Well, imagine if you had a framework to quickly bridge that gap. I mean, that would be worth so much, wouldn't it?
I would definitely say yes.
I know. Well, I'm so excited that we're going to learn that today from our guest, Mario Sikora. So,
And do we
um,
say
we're
Mario or Mario?
From the Northeast in Philadelphia, we say it as Mario.
Okay.
But I
Mario.
hear
I
Mario.
got it right.
There
And
you
I
go.
should have worked that out in
That's all
pre-show.
right. No worries.
Hey,
So
we're human.
Mario, that's right. And we're going to find out how human today. So, Mario, welcome to our podcast. Mario is an internationally known expert in the theory and application of the Enneagram model of personality styles, which he combines with deep knowledge in performance improvement, clear thinking skills, and fundamentals of leadership. Mario is the founder and CEO of Awareness to Action International, which provides executive coaching and enneagram-based leadership programs. As Mario says, the Enneagram is his secret weapon, and we can't wait to learn from him today. So, Mario, welcome to Messy in the Middle.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Ed and Jefi. It's great to be here with you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, we are so excited about this because we've stumbled on things along the way, and we're going to learn some techniques on how to apply that to keep from that happening. So we thought we'd dive in quickly to the backstory. Maybe you can just give a brief introduction to the Enneagram for those that don't know it. I'm familiar with it, and so maybe to kind of help you explain some of these things, I happen to be a 3, which is the achiever, and Jefi is a 7, which is the enthusiast. So you're going to have a wild show today with those two
Yes,
types.
yes. A lot of energy. A lot of energy here today.
Right.
All right, great. So the Enneagram is a model of 9 different personality styles, okay? And, different teachers, different authors have different names that they give the 9 types. I refer to these as adaptive strategies. Okay, so each of these points represents a adaptive strategy, a way of solving problems, addressing the things that come into our world. Now, Ennea is Greek for 9, gram for drawing. So the Enneagram is this kind of funny looking diagram with 9 points on it and 9 lines between those. And people have over the years mapped 9 different personality styles to each of these points. Okay. And so for me, these strategies represent an internal need to feel a certain way. So the 3 is what we would call striving to feel outstanding, right? So there's just something about me that wants to stand out in some way, right? That wants to be successful, that wants to achieve things, that wants to accomplish things, that wants to do things.
Sounds about right.
Sounds about right. So the type 7, which Jefi is striving to feel excited. Okay, I want stimulation. Okay, I want something new. I want something interesting. I want options. I want opportunities. I want choices. Okay, so the people that almost love the menu more than they love the meal, right? Because there's all these things I could have. My wife is that personality style, Jefi, too. And so when we go out to a restaurant, it's, well, you order this and I'm going to order this. And in case I don't like this, I can have some of that. And,
Totally.
And she literally used to collect menus from restaurants, right? Because just the idea of having choices just thrills her. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, so this need to feel a certain way shapes the way we think. Okay, so if I want to feel excited, well, then I'm going to think about exciting things or ways to be excited. Okay, if I want to feel outstanding, I'm going to think about, well, how can I stand out? How can I achieve things? And then this shapes the way we do things, the way we act. Okay, well, I'm going to act in ways that make sense according to that. Okay, so each of these points on the Enneagram represents one of these 9 strategies. Now, what most people don't know about the Enneagram is that there's this other element to it. And I think that's probably what we're going to focus on today, because number one, it's easier. There's only 3 of them, right? So, whereas there's 9 types, now we're going to talk about these 3 instinctual biases, they're called. Okay. And if the strategy is how we go about getting the things we want, the instinctual biases point to what are those things that we want, right? What matters to us? What do we really value? Okay, what am I trying to accomplish and achieve when I get up in the morning?
Right. And would you say that this would be something that if we did run across a client or a situation, we could kind of assess the situation and go, okay, they are one of these 3 things this person likes to be communicated with in this style, or they have a need of this. That's kind of the purpose of understanding those 3?
That's absolutely it. So I work with leaders in organizations. I'm an executive coach and leadership development consultant. And when I'm working with a client, I am trying to understand which of these instinctual biases is dominant with them, because it tells me a couple of things. Number one, it tells me what they value, okay, what is important to them. But it also tells me what's not important to them, okay? And when I understand their instinctual bias, and I understand the instinctual bias of the people around them, I understand why they have disconnections, right? At a more fundamental level, so my wife has a different instinctual bias than I do, okay? She's what we would call the preserver, right? Somebody with a preserving bias. So for her, nesting and nurturing is everything, right? Am I comfortable? Am I safe? Do I have the things that I need? Do I have all the resources that I want? I, on the other hand, I'm what is called a navigator, or have a navigating bias. And I don't care about the preserving stuff, right? So when my wife starts focusing on these things, I can kind of tune out sometimes and not think it's that important. Now, the trick is to this, and the reason this is valuable, is if I am trying to build rapport with my wife, which I do my best to do, I have to remember to speak her language and speak preserving and focus on preserving things rather than focus on what I think is important to me.
Gotcha.
Very, very interesting. Well, I can see why this matters for us as realtors, because we meet a client for the first time. We're in their home on the listing side, or we're meeting at our office or in a coffee house on the buy side. And it's really important for us to kind of understand what's important to them.
Right.
Yes.
And we bring our own biases to the table. And sometimes you get that natural fit where it just works and you become best friends right away. I mean, I have clients I vacation with and do all these things. And then sometimes you've just got this disconnect that we talked about, and we don't understand why. And I know I tend to work harder, right? But with my biases, I'm probably making it worse for them.
Yes.
So if there's a bad match. So I think before we zoom in, let's make sure we get a good summary of the 3.
Yes.
And paint that picture a little bit, and then we'll go into how to apply it.
Sure. So the best way to think about this, and how I always teach this, I tell people to imagine watching a documentary about peacocks. Okay, so you're sitting at home, you're watching the Nature Channel, if that's even still a thing, I'm not sure, and a documentary about peacocks comes on. The first part of the documentary, they're going to focus on what we would call the preserving domain, which is all about nesting and nurturing, like I said. Okay, how does the peacock make its nest? How does it protect itself? How does it feed itself? How does it groom itself to stay healthy? How does it take care of its offspring? Right? All these things that are related to the fundamentals of well-being, physical well-being, safety, security. Okay? The second part of the documentary is about what we call the navigating domain. And this is all about understanding social dynamics and group politics. Okay, what are the politics of the flock, right? Who knows who? What's the relationships between these different peacocks? And how do I make sure that I don't offend that one and don't offend that one, and I connect with this one when I need to? So it's all about understanding subtle, nuanced social dynamics. Okay? The third domain is what we call the transmitting domain. And this is all about attracting and bonding and getting attention so I can do those things. And with the peacock, they spread their feathers, they let out this loud call. They say, hey, come look at me, right? Pay attention to me because I have something I want to pass on to you. Okay. Now for the peacock, what they're trying to pass on is their genes, right? So they can make little pea babies. But it's all about getting noticed so I can connect. Now, humans are more complicated than peacocks. Okay, peacocks have tiny little heads and tiny little brains inside those heads. But when it comes right down to it, humans just care about the same three things. Okay, preserving, navigating, and transmitting. And we all care about all three of them. And under different circumstances, we'll really focus on one. Like when COVID first hit, what did everybody do? They ran out, they bought toilet paper, right? They ran out, they bought canned food. They ran out and bought supplies. So it was like everybody's preserving instincts went on overdrive. Okay.
Right.
But over the course of our lives, we all have a bias towards one of them over the other two. And we call that our zone of excuse me just a second. We can edit this piece here. I just had
That's
kind of
fine.
a little mind blank there.
That's fine.
No.
Live radio.
So we call this dominant one the zone of enthusiasm, right? Meaning it's the one that we care about the most. It's the one that our attention goes to. The other one is what we call the zone of inner conflict, meaning I'm drawn to it, but I have this discomfort with it at times. And the third one is what we call a zone of indifference, meaning, I kind of know it's important, but I really just don't care about it. Okay. Now, when we understand somebody's dominant instinctual bias, we will also know what is the one that they're indifferent about. Because transmitters will be indifferent about the navigating things. Navigators like me will be indifferent about the preserving things. And preservers will be indifferent about the transmitting things. So if we speak our own language, right, our own instinctual language to somebody who is indifferent about what we're saying, they're going to be indifferent about what we're saying. Okay. So Ed, if you're a transmitter and you speak transmitter to somebody who's a preserver, or they speak preserving to you, there's going to be this disconnect that you mentioned.
Right. Very, very interesting.
I know we're probably going to zoom in here a little bit, but I'm very curious if there are things that we can pick up on when we go to someone's home. So it's not necessarily chatting with them, but as they're showing us their house, because a lot of times that's the first time we meet people.
Yeah.
Are there little things that we can pick up on to see which one of those they are?
Yeah. So it's important to point out that, we're taking, 8 billion people on the planet and putting them into three groups, right? So there's going to be variation within this, okay? But there are these tendencies that we see. There are these hints that we can pick up. And for somebody who's preserving, their home is going to be like a nest, right? It's going to be comfortable. It's not going to be flashy. It's going to be practical. They're going to very often enjoy doing things with their hands. Okay, so very often when I encounter men who are preservers, they like to do woodwork. They like to fix things around the house and so forth. Okay, you'll see knickknacks that are comforting memories of things. You'll see comfortable furniture, right? You're not going to see this kind of modernist art furniture that looks like a torture rack to sit in, okay? Because I want to be comfortable, okay? You're going to see lots of pillows. You're going to see blankets, all these sort of things. You're going to see a place that looks like a comfortable nest. It's going to look like a Maxwell House commercial, right? Or something from a Hallmark TV movie, right? Okay. With transmitters, it's going to be a bit flashier, right? Transmitters are kind of peacocks. Okay. So now again, there's always going to be these variables because you might have a transmitter married to a preserver or something like that.
Sure.
You get this mix, but it's going to be a bit more on the flashy side, right? A bit more standing out because transmitters are kind of like peacocks. Okay. They want to be noticed. They like things that are interesting and flashy around them. Navigators are a little trickier. And one of the challenges with navigators is that you can almost identify them more by the things that they don't do than by the things that they do. And so navigators are typically going to be relatively indifferent to their environment. Okay. Yeah, sure. I want a comfortable place to sit. I want a nice, in my living room, I want a nice big TV there because I like to watch Netflix and, whatever else. But beyond that, I couldn't even tell you what color the trim on the outside of the house is, right? And because navigators tend not to care about those things.
Okay.
Wow.
Very cool.
So that's very, very cool. So now if we were meeting somebody for the first time, a realtor's meeting them, and not on the listing, but on the buying side. And so maybe it's in an office visit, or a very common place is a coffee house for that first meeting. What would we be looking for there? Would it be like clothes, jewelry, that type of thing? So
there's a couple of things that you want to look for, and this can often be sort of a process of elimination when you're interacting with people, okay? And you want to think of, okay, what is it that I want to sort of feel the water about, okay? So there's a couple of things. I would usually ask somebody, oh, would you like something to drink, right? Kind of test them for that preserving need. Watch how they react to the furniture that they're going to have to sit in, okay? Watch how they react to the temperature. And am I too close to the window because it's going to be cold, right? So preservers tend to be very conscious of their environment because they want it to be safe, comfortable, and supportive. Their affect, meaning their emotional state, the way they talk, etc., is going to be a bit more subdued for the most part. Now, we do have to remember that sometimes we've got this other element of the enneagram, which is the strategy. So somebody who has Jefi's striving to feel excited strategy is going to be a mix of things, right? Because there's this part of her that is outgoing and expressive, and then there's this other part of her that, I don't know if this is your case, Jefi, but my wife has that same strategy. Yeah. So, but for her, it's like she's bubbly and talkative and outgoing, and you would think she's a peacock, except you start to notice, hey, wait a minute, she's all about her comfort. Right, she's all about making sure that she has food and that her stomach feels okay and that it's warm enough and all these other sorts of things, right? So we want to watch for where does their attention go? Does it go toward my physical comfort? Okay, I often ask people what their hobbies are when I talk to them because like I said before, preservers are going to be nesters and like to fix things around the house. Now with transmitters, this is the second thing I look for. What is their affect, right? Are they outgoing? Are they expressive? Are they flashy? Are they obviously extroverted? There are some giveaways, right? Like every time I see leopard skin on somebody, I'm thinking transmitter, right? Every time I'm seeing jewelry on a man that's not a watch or a wedding ring, I'm starting to think transmitter, right? So anything that sparkles, anything that's a little peacocky, anything about their demeanor that is expressive, outgoing, loving to tell stories, and maybe not so great a listener, okay? Because they're busy transmitting very often. So these are some of the things I start to sort for, okay? That's
so interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And usually the navigators are the leftovers, right? The ones who don't fit the transmitting domain and don't fit the preserving domain. They listen more, okay? They'll respond to questions about people dynamics and who they know. Not in a, like, so, oh, I know that guy, he's my best friend sort of thing. That's not what a navigator will do. That's what a transmitter will do. Oh, yeah, I know so-and-so, and yeah, and he knows this one, and he knows that one, and so forth, okay? So these are some of the basic indicators that I look for.
That's really interesting. I was reflecting, you were asking about hobbies, and Jefi and I are both cyclists, coincidentally, but I ride a bike. It's called a Colnago. It's Italian-made steel, hand-painted, flashy, and it's like recognized on the road.
Yes.
What's that tell you?
Yeah, well, yeah, right? Because people are going to notice this bike, right, is what's going on. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
That is really
that-
interesting. So go ahead, Ed. Do we want to talk about how we can, once we identify what these people are, how we can best serve them would be how I would say it?
Yes, and I definitely want to do that. And maybe another way to phrase it as well is if we have a bias and they have a bias, how do we recognize that and not trip all over it?
Yeah.
And make sure that we are serving our clients, because doing, hitting the nail harder with our hammer is not the right answer.
Right. I do that quite often. So just don't do what I do.
Well, and we all do, because that's human nature, right? And the analogy I use is, you ever go up to a door and you go to pull it and it doesn't open. And so what do? We pull harder and we pull harder. And then we see a little sign that says push, right? And, but this is what we all do. We don't necessarily say, oh, that didn't work, so let me do the opposite. We repeat things. And we do this with our instinctual bias as well. This person is not responding to my peacock self. I better add some more feathers here. Okay. Because that just is what makes sense. So what we want to do first of all is recognize which one of these we are. Okay. It's always, when I work with leaders in organizations, I always tell them there's two reasons to learn these things. Number one, understand our own patterns so we can see how we get in our own way of things by focusing on these things, but not those things. Okay. Then we need to understand the people around us so we can be more, have more empathy toward them and adjust our approach to them. So what we want to do is, first of all, have a sense of what I have a tendency to overdo. Do I overdo the preserving? Do I overdo the navigating? Do I overdo the transmitting? And then just be conscious of that. Let me make sure I'm hitting all three domains here. Okay. Now, I'm not a realtor. I like to say I'm a realtor by marriage because my wife's family is in real estate, so I get a little understanding of the business. But if I'm going into a home and trying to, sell somebody, I'm going to feel. I'm going to ask different questions to see what they respond to. Okay. So that's the key thing. Let me get out of what I think is important. Let me ask questions related to all three of these domains, and then see what they light up about. Right? When I talk about the preserving elements, this room is so comfortable, right? This place is so safe. Okay. If they're responding to that, they're probably a preserver. And I want to push that a little bit more, right? Even though it's not important to me, if I sense that it's important to the client, I want to talk more about that. If I'm talking about the safety and security and they're just yawning, well, I want to move to either the navigating things or the transmitting things, right? Look how beautiful this house is. Man, people fight to get into this neighborhood. There's a lot of prestige living in this zip code, sort of thing. Okay. And with the navigating thing, so-and-so lives over here and it's really easy to, meet people and talk to people over at the park here, those sort of things that relate to somebody who's interested in people dynamics. Okay. Yeah. So feel around, see what people light up about. Okay. But it's easier for us to see that if we're not trapped in expecting them to respond to what lights us up.
Right. So important.
Very good. Very good advice there. That's really good. What other gems do you have for us?
Oh boy, how long do we have? No. So the key thing with this is, again, to recognize that we all fall into patterns, habitual patterns. Okay, we like to think that we're conscious, we're awake, we're alert all the time, that we're totally aware and thinking, in the moment about what's happening. When the reality is, we're often stuck in habitual ruts of thinking about the world and interacting with people. So we want to remember that and saying, here, you know what, I'm slipping into my navigating thing again, or I'm slipping into my type 3 thing again. In my case, it's the type 8, right? Striving to feel powerful. I tend to be bossy and give orders and demanding. I want to remember, take a deep breath, okay? Don't fall into these habitual patterns, and watch for what is appealing to other people instead of projecting onto them. That is the biggest thing. The key to this really is not to try and use it to manipulate people, but to build rapport so we can help them. All right.
Right.
You know, it helps to think of these things as languages. My son, as we're speaking, he's been sending me pictures today from Morocco. Right, he's doing a semester abroad in Rome. He's on spring break. He went to Spain. He's in Morocco now. Now, if you go to Europe, and Ed, I know you were just in Costa Rica. If you go to some other place and you speak to them in English and expect them to respond to you,
Yeah.
you're not going to get anywhere. And we just can't speak English louder and slower like we tend to do. We have to think, okay,
Right.
what language are they speaking here? And let me speak to this language as best I can if I want to influence them.
I love that. I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I know we're running long, but I think people are really going to love this. So
Sure.
if you could give us maybe some direction for each of these three in a business setting, so how they would like to be communicated with, or something that works really well for these three types, so that when we're working in a transactional piece of this process, do you have some of those off the top of your head that you can think of?
Yeah, I'll tell you what. So I'll give you
Okay.
that, and I'll tell you what. I'm going to throw a little bonus thing in here that you didn't
Okay.
ask for. Okay,
Great.
if you're a preserver and
Yes.
running your own business, one of the things you want to think about is getting better at transmitting. Okay, because preservers tend to focus on the details, the structures, and they're not always so good at promoting themselves. Okay. So learning to promote yourself if you're a preserver is really helpful. If you're a navigator, learn to get better at the details. Okay, so if you're running your own business, make sure you're doing your paperwork, all the administrative stuff that navigators really, really hate. Okay, pay attention to details. And if you're a transmitter, get better at listening to people. Right, get better at letting them talk, asking them questions, and actually listening to their responses. Okay, so that's how all of us can do better in our business. Now, as far as appealing to the other folks, if I'm if I'm trying to appeal to a preserver, I want to speak to issues of safety, security, and resources. Okay, having enough of the things that we need, having safety, stability, security, and traditions and memories. One of the things I often see when I walk into a preserver's house is what I call the refrigerator hall of fame, right? Where they've got the refrigerator with all the pictures all over, right? My kid playing baseball here, my other one playing softball there, and so forth, right? So it's like there are these shrines to memories of the past. So this is something very appealing that we can speak to with preservers. With transmitters, we want to speak in an exciting way, right? Man, this place, look at this, look at these exposed beams here. Aren't they amazing, right? You really want to amp up the energy when you're talking to a transmitter. And with a navigator, you want to kind of slow things down, keep things moving, ask them about places they've been, people that they know, that sort of thing, relationships that they have, because that's what they're interested in and that's what they want to talk about. Okay, so talk about people with navigators, talk about safety, the nest with preservers, and exciting things with the transmitters. You can't go wrong.
I love this.
Well, this has been so valuable, and I know if our listeners want to learn more or connect with you, where should they go? Where should they contact?
So you can find links to all my resources at mariolinks.com. Okay, I've got free videos there. We've got some free resources, blog stuff. There's also some online programs that people can do and our consulting services. But mariolinks.com, and feel free to reach out to me through that website.
You have been a gift for us today, Mario.
It's been fun.
Thank you. This is so amazing.
You sure have.
I do
Been
want to
really
say, too,
fun.
I've listened to your podcast, and I would highly recommend listening to that. There are such
thank
good
you.
nuggets in there as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
Great
Wonderful.
stuff. Well, we hope everyone's gotten a ton out of this today. I know I'm playing some things back in my mind. I wish it would have applied in
I took 3
situations.
pages of notes.
I love it.